Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to our video game adaptations episode for the month of March, where we're talking The Last of Us.
Yay! Finally, for real, we're here.
That's right. No more fake outs. No more like, oh, we think we know and we don't know. We are talking The Last of Us. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you excited? I'm like, this one is like, this is probably the most excited I'll be until we get towards the end of our series where we talk about the big ones.
Probably me too. This might actually be the most excited I get. I've been looking forward to this.
That's probably fair. Yeah, no, that's probably fair. And I'm gonna say it now, and I'll say it. I'll try to remember to say it periodically, or if you try to remember. Anybody watching this, whether it's now or later, this is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. We are not holding back on any secrets. We are going to talk from, everything we feel like talking about in the span of 2 hours. So, if
game spoilers, show spoilers,
every spoiler. Yeah. The only thing I think we're going to probably not do is we won't go into anything from game 2.
Yes.
Leave that, you guys can suffer that heartbreak like we had to the first.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, completely spoiler filled. And before we jump into it, I did want to do a quick plug for something Kat and I are doing on socials right now. Starting yesterday through, what's the date? The
27th.
27th, right? Yeah. We are participating in the hashtag trans readathon. So if you're not familiar, a lot of really bad stuff going on right now. And so this is something, you probably know. Who was the guy? There was somebody that started it, right?
I think Sim Kern started it.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I think that's right. That was I think that's the name I saw in Nico Bell's post originally. So basically, the entire point is to promote and read trans authors. So for the entire next week, I'm reading short stories because I don't read as fast as Kat does. And it's all going to be stories by trans authors, and then just promoting them and their work and positivity towards the trans community. And then my specific pledge was, in the reading that I am doing, for every short story that I finish, I am donating $25 to PFLAG, which is a local community thing. I'm doing the one in Johns Creek, which is close to Atlanta where I live. And then if anyone that's watching this now or later till next week, I'm doing $1 for these pride stickers that I have for my logo and for the logo of the guys over at Horror Fiend TV. These are literally $1, and I will put them in the mail to you. It's that simple. You can DM me for PayPal, and all of that money is going to be added to my money to go to the organization that I'm donating to. So, okay. All right. Are we ready?
I think we're ready.
Okay. So you played this game all the way through, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Twice, actually.
Okay.
I went back. I took today off because I had a bunch of work to do, and then I didn't do that. I replayed The Last of Us for the first time in 10 years, and it was
Okay, that was going to be what I was
excited.
Gonna ask. I was going to say, like, how close have you, like, when was the last time that you played it?
Today. I replayed it today.
That's so funny. Okay.
And I had to, the fun part, this is one of my favorite games of all time. I don't own a copy. I had to steal a copy of The Last of Us today. I forgot because it was just, which it makes sense, because that's why I haven't played it in 10 years, is because, like, if I had a copy lying around, I would have replayed it before now. But I had forgotten until, like, a couple weeks ago. I went to replay it in preparation for this, and it was like, oh shit, like, that wasn't my copy that I played. And then it's like, damn it.
I was going to ask if it was like part of your custody battle with your console, or if it was like something unrelated.
It was pre-custody battle with the console, but it was with the it was with that partner. We had just started dating in 2013, and The Last of Us had just come come out.
Yeah.
And we didn't have like a lot of bonding activities because we were both gamers, but we liked very different types of games.
Sure.
And The Last of Us was very much a me kind of game.
Sure.
So he bought it, and I was like, you know what? Because at the time I didn't like know what it was like to watch someone play video games, and I was
Sure.
like, this is like a girlfriend thing. I'll try this. And I got so hooked, and he got in like 20, 30 minutes maybe, and he
Yeah.
was bored. So I waited until he like was at work, and I was like, I'm just gonna play this real quick. And I waited until he was somewhere else, and I played it. I think on his PlayStation. I don't even think I brought it home. I just like snuck into his room, and it was like, okay,
Oh
we're
my
doing
God,
this.
that's funny.
And then so I beat it, and then I started over and played back to where he was. I don't even think he noticed. Like, I'm not sure. We never talked about it again. Like,
that's funny. And then you replayed it today.
And then I replayed it today.
Okay. So I forget, first of all, until the show kind of started going, I had kind of forgotten it had been that long since the game came out. Like it's been a while. Yeah, I think so. This was one of my most hyped things for the year was The Last of Us. And so and I'll be honest, I think we talked about this in another episode. Like I wasn't really worried. Like I didn't go into it like worrying about like, oh, hi. And I think like I didn't go into it thinking like worrying about like that it wasn't going to be done well because it's HBO, and you know I thought okay it's going to be really well done. I didn't have like my expectations were high, but I wasn't concerned like I would have been if like Netflix had done it or something, you know, something totally different. But like how are you feeling like when it first, like I know we talked a little bit about it already, but just like general like feelings getting ready to watch it?
Yeah, I also didn't have a lot of concern for it. And usually I've been burned a lot. It took me several times to learn that I don't like video game adaptations typically. Like I've been burned a lot of times because I had really high hopes going into so many of them.
Sure.
And you know, usually now when I see that they're doing a game I like, it's like,
oh, no.
do they have to? Like,
yeah.
But everything about this looked so good. I trusted the team behind it. I trusted HBO, which I don't know why I trusted HBO because I was still going through House of the Dragon, which just like every episode of that broke my fucking heart.
Oh,
like,
no.
I hate this.
Oh no.
But for whatever reason, I still trusted HBO. And Pedro Pascal, I think, only is in good stuff. So
yeah. I mean, you know, it's so I don't do Game of Thrones. It's not really my thing. I think if it were like edited for TV, it would be my thing to some degree, but it's got a lot of stuff in the beginning that's not for me. But you know, it's funny, like the first thing I think I ever saw him in, as far as like more recent stuff, was there's this kid movie called We Can Be Heroes.
Yeah.
And he plays a dad. He plays the leader of the heroes in that. And so and then of course the Mandalorian, and then now this. And I actually was not familiar with Bella Ramsey at all. I think their first I guess like acting job was Game of Thrones though. So I don't think they had really done anything because they were only like 11 or something.
Yeah. And I think that might have been so my all-time favorite character from Game of Thrones. I'm a huge Game of Thrones nerd.
Yeah.
I'm like a speaking high Valyrian Game of Thrones nerd. My favorite character in the books and in the show is Oberyn Martell, who's Pedro Pascal's character, and my very strong contender for second favorite character, because like there are a lot of characters that you really like at some point and then they fuck up and do something unforgivable, and it's one of those kinds of shows. I think the only other character that I never have a problem with is actually Lyanna Mormont, who's Bella Ramsey's character. So it was like this funny. Was a dream pairing for me.
Yeah. And I mean, and I thought like even on a basic level of not knowing too much about their careers, either one of them, I thought they just looked ready to go. Like I was like, this looks like, you know, I mean, she looks like Ashley Johnson, is Is that right? Ashley Johnson? Ashley something. The person
Ashley.
who voices Ellie in the game. She favors her. Like she could be like her, or they could be her daughter. Like if that was,
Yeah.
but anyway, so yeah, so then we get to our first episode, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Which is like I knew what was going to happen. I knew, and it's still I just like. But when you think like opening episode for any series, horror related specifically, probably, but like any series like this built tension like there was no tomorrow.
Oh boy, yeah. It was tense. And I got really emotional during the first episode. Because again, I wasn't worried about it, but I had this had been one of my favorite games, and gaming is one of those things where it's like, in high school a lot I was trying to get my parents to like appreciate that games had stories, because it
Yeah,
was one of
right.
those they didn't get it, and
Yeah.
and this felt like, and I kept trying to explain this to dad and I didn't have the words for it at the time, where it was
Yeah.
like, this feels like a show that we could watch, like it feels like a movie you and I would watch.
Yeah.
And because it has dad vibes, but like
Oh my God. Yeah, I know what you mean.
he couldn't like, but he's not a gamer, and I just like I could not get him into any of these things, and I got so emotional because it was like this was the experience that I wanted to have, and almost immediately I like went I went to find my dad. I was like, we're watching this right now. I'm subjecting you to this show. Like,
Yeah,
10
I mean,
years later
it's
we're finally gonna watch this, and it was like, but it was very fulfilling, like right off the bat. It
yeah.
had all of those like, and usually I don't get as tense watching a show as I do playing a game.
Yeah, because it's
So
you in the game. Like, it's,
yeah.
yeah, totally different experience. Yeah, I think well, and I think the thing is, like, I think it is a craft to create something, whether it's an adaptation or not, where you immediately are connected to characters. Because even though
Yeah.
we don't have that much time in that, time of that time frame, we don't get that much time in it before we're like, really thrown into everything else. But I was like, I was invested in the family, and this is this is reconnecting with it outside of the game. It's been
Yeah.
years since the game, so reconnecting with this little family and like how they like and just and it's like I said, I knew what was going to happen, and it's like I totally forgot about it. I totally forgot. I got wrapped up in the birthday stuff. I got wrapped up in her going next door, and then there's that moment where she's in the house next door and she's facing, was it like a bookshelf, I think, and you see
The twitching like in the back.
Oh
So
God,
good.
I had so much anxiety. And it didn't end after that. I had anxiety until the episode was finished.
Yeah. It's and this was a little bit mean. Cuz I knew what was going to happen going in. I I think losing Sarah was probably one of the most impactful moments of any video game ever, cuz that just I
Yeah.
didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
right.
I was like, I started the pilot and I was just dreading going into this, because it's like, this one's going to be the worst episode. I'm going to feel so bad.
Yeah.
I was on the edge of my seat waiting for it. And it's not like they added a ton of time to the episode, to her backstory, but I feel like they characterized her so much extra. Like they just went above and beyond. And it hurt so
So
bad losing
bad.
her.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it tore me to I was literally like, I think of all the times I cried, which I'm like 90% sure was every episode. I
Yeah.
think that was the one I cried the hardest. And I think some of it was like you really do, like you learn to love her in a very short period of time. And it's like I said, it's like watching Moulin Rouge. I always forget. It tells you in the beginning of the movie what happens, and I always forget halfway through. And this was kind of like that, because then I was like, but then of course I'm like, I'm invested, and I'm like, oh, this is really creepy and crazy. And then we get to some of the chaotic stuff, and then we get to where they're in the truck, and I was like, and
Yeah.
then it was like something happened, and I was like, Oh no. Like it was like remembering all over again, like she's about to die. And it's getting closer to this time when she dies. And I literally like instant, like I just we weren't even there yet. And I'm like crying. And like I think cause so my partner and I watched this, we watched it every Sunday together. And I think I was like texting at the time and I was like, I'm already crying and like nothing crazy is happening. Yes, it was very heartbreaking.
So heartbreaking.
Very heartbreaking. And like, it was so sad. And then like we get to the part where it actually happens and I literally could not breathe. Like I was crying so hard. I was so upset. I was like, if this is this episode, I am so fucked for the rest of the series.
I also didn't know because they had started, I didn't know how close at the time this was going to follow the game, so there was also
right. They kept all of that very like,
and it's like I knew that Sarah was gonna die. That was the one death I was sure. It's like if they change everything else, Sarah's still dead
that's gonna be the one thing. Yeah.
She has to, they have to get rid of her so that Ellie can be in the picture, after but it was like, I will say I was surprised because they started, I loved the opening scene of this so much where it's the talk show and they're talking about the cordyceps. Like they leaned into the spore from minute 1 of this show. And I was just like, there was that moment where I was taken aback and then they introduced Sarah and then it was like, I did have to constantly remind myself like, no, this girl's gonna die.
And I didn't do that. I literally just like threw it out the window. I was like, it'll be fine. Everyone gets a happy ending. Like, and I know this is not the game for that. Like, this is not the story for that because it's like not happy. Like some moments, sure, but most of it's sad and depressing. Like, yeah. I loved the first episode. I think the first episode for people who have not played the game, watched the game, know anything about it, this was a great get you involved, get you invested in the story. And I think would make people want to see more, without like, because the pilot is supposed to be engaging. You're supposed to want to watch more from seeing it. That's the whole point. But this, I think, nailed everything. It set the tone, the pace, every single thing that you would need to know going into the rest of the series.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it did a really good job at that.
Yeah. And then, and then, when we go into, what is it? Let's see, episode 2, I guess we'll go there. Eventually it'll just like ramblings will take over, but I'm trying to like stick to order as much as I possibly can. Yeah. So then we're fast forward 20 years and this is when we start meeting some of the additional folks like, Marlene and, Tess and, just some of those other people that like, we didn't get to see in the first episode, obviously Ellie and it's like, I will say this, something that like, there's no denying in my opinion is when Bella Ramsey, when they are on scene, like when the camera is on them and they are Ellie, right?
Yeah.
There is like, talk about like commanding the room. Like it is so hard. You can't take your eyes off of them. Like you're just like enthralled, invested. The first time she said the F word, I was like, oh, this is going to be so good. She's perfect. Like I love it. This is the best Ellie. So it was, but it like just kind of solidified like this is going to be good.
Yeah, it did. It really did. And I like that they just, I feel like I'm going to talk about the casting a lot, but they did such a good job casting.
So important though.
Like, and I know a lot of people were complaining, a lot of idiots were complaining, when the first pictures came out and when the casting was announced and stuff, and they were complaining that they didn't look enough like the characters. And it's like, I never saw that. It was like, even in the stills, it was like spot on.
Yeah. And their chemistry is so good. Didn't. I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you saying? Chemistry?
Oh, just the chemistry was like so good between the two of them. Like it felt like playing the game again.
It did. And it was such a natural, it just felt natural. It didn't feel like they were acting.
No.
And I think like I don't have, you know, if I think about the cast as a whole, I don't think I feel like there's a single weak link in this
No,
cast.
I don't
Not a
think there
single
was.
one.
And usually there's like at least one that it's
I
like,
mean,
you
yeah,
know.
I think like hey, what's up, Blood and Bruce?
Hello.
I think, yeah, no, the casting for The Last of Us, I think, is like super, like, genuinely, like, it was perfect. I literally loved every single, you know, Tommy, Marley, all the big ones, Tess. Oh my God, like, perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. I don't think I saw a lot of the hate for the original, for the stills and stuff, because I didn't know people felt that way originally.
Yeah, I always end up on like the worst parts of Twitter and then I have to like hack myself out. Uh Because I was like, I was so surprised to see that there was like that the other reactions were positive, you know,
Yeah.
at first. Because I saw the negativity first, and it was like, I don't understand. And then and then I
Yeah.
backed out of that, and it's like everyone else seemed to be doing okay, and it was the casting, the initial casting, I saw some of that negativity, and then unfortunately I saw, skipping ahead an episode, I guess, but I did see a lot of the like homophobic stuff about
No,
episode
I did end
3,
up seeing quite a few of those.
and
I did a TikTok about it because it
and
got under
like
my skin so bad. I was like, I need to get
back
it out of
out.
my system. Yeah, that one I did see a lot
I
of that too.
and I felt like it's one of those, it was so sad to see that from anyone, but it was also very fun. I feel bad saying it, but I do think it's very funny when people are like, "Oh, he was completely straight in the game.
Oh
His use of
no.
partner was in like, and people will just like they'll talk themselves in all kinds of circles to not see that this was a gay couple canonically."
Yeah. Oh my, I think I saw some of that too. Well, and I think the thing is like, and I know a lot of people like some zombie movies and things related to viruses and stuff are just that. They're virus things, they're zombie things. There's not a lot of other things going on. And I think that's fine, it works. But one of the things that made The Last of Us so special, especially as a video game, is it's essentially a drama. Like it's
Yeah.
essentially, you know, it's a story about the people and all of the things that happened to them post this horrible thing, you know, 20 years later or whatever. So, like, the fact that the thing that I kept seeing was people were mad that they felt like it was too much. It was like, it didn't need to be a whole episode. Why?
But
Because,
yeah,
like,
there's and this is something I think that the show does. This is what I want video game adaptations to do, is because, they took out some of the action sequences, some of the things that were gameplay elements, and they replaced them with things that were
yes,
cinematic, because it
yes,
is a cinematic adaptation. Like it's a two
yep.
screen adaptation. This is what good adaptations do.
I
Yeah, I saw some
100%
of
agree.
that, and it's like I don't understand what the and as for the drama aspects, The Last of Us, the game, first of all, but especially the show, I think follows a tradition of some of the best zombie media being more about the tensions between humans than they
Totally
are
agree.
about the zombies at all,
Totally
A-
agree.
and that's been a thing since like Night of the Living Dead,
Agree. It's
like
not a new concept. Sure. No,
no.
not at all. And it seems, so what's really crazy is it's not a new concept, but it has been one that has been kind of difficult for there to be a balance of in zombie films. Like, small tangent, when I was really into The Walking Dead, I I was really invested because the first season it did that. It was all about the like the psychological effects and all the things that happen to the people post this horrible situation. And then it just like went way off into the deep end. But that was, to me, I'm finding that seems to be a little bit harder to find in things zombie, virus, whatever you would say related. But this is like the other, and this is so, I don't feel like any of the things that they embellished or I guess really embraced or brought, or spent more time on, all of that, all it did was add to the feelings, the things that we felt. Because I will tell you this, as sad as that window scene is, right,
Yeah.
it was so much sadder this time than it was in the I'm like, we just went through their whole relationship. Like, I was so upset.
That just it snuck up on me because it was like out of all of the deaths in the game, I really, not that it wasn't sad in the game, but I thought it was the one I was most equipped to handle, you
Sure,
know?
and then they made an entire episode about
And
it.
that was the one you were talking about how you had kind of forgotten about Sarah. I got so sucked in to their romance
Oh,
that I had forgotten and it ends sweeter in sweeter
yes.
but it
Yeah.
ends sweeter in the show also. So first of all, I was not at all prepared for how it ended, but like
Yeah, it's
uh,
different. Yeah.
even if I had been, it was still like I cared so much more about them this time around.
Yeah. Genuinely like invested. And I had forgot, I forgot some things. So like, in the very beginning of episode 3, when he falls into the pit or whatever, they have like their first meeting. It wasn't until he said his name that I
Yeah.
realized who he was supposed to be. I just was like, I was just like, oh, don't trust him, shoot him. Like,
Same.
and then
You
he
see
said,
someone come in and it's like, kill them dead.
and I'm like, you can't trust anyone. It's a zombie apocalypse. Like, what are you doing right now? But then he said his name, and I was like, oh, don't kill him. Don't kill him. I want to see where this
So
goes.
bad after I realized because it's like, oh no,
I know.
I don't want to root for him to be dead.
I know. God, that's probably one of my, if not my favorite, one of my favorite episodes. I think the time that they took to really show that relationship on on camera, however, whatever the correct term is. I feel like it was more than worth it. It was more than worth the changes and things that they kind of reworked to give us a different, kind of look at this relationship. It was gorgeous. Like, because and I think people that get caught up in the homophobic thing, aside from all of the other things
Aside
wrong
from
with them, is that this whole concept is centered around finding love and peace and harmony in a world that has gone to complete shit, where you can't trust anybody. You don't know if you're going to be alive tomorrow. And then not only that, but their relationship, kind of referencing this sense of like the little bit of light in a dark room, and like the fucking strawberry scene, like, come on.
Oh man. It
Come
was rough.
on. So good. Oh, that was such a good episode. I loved that one. I cried the whole time for that one too. Sometimes it was like happy crying. Sometimes it was like sad crying.
So I've cried during every episode, but that was
Yeah,
one
same.
because I've been watching by myself when they come out, and then I was watching with my parents like later in the week.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
because mom was around when I went to Subjected Dad, and she doesn't like sad shows. She is so mad at me right now. She's furious. But I was that was one though, and this has only ever happened like a couple times with me because I try to be really good. I try to keep a poker face going into stuff so that they don't know what's coming. I put on episode 3 and I just started crying all over again, and it's like, and I think mom almost left. She was like, "How bad does this get?"
Oh my god. Oh, that is so funny. And you know what I do think is well done though? It's such a sad thing, but it's not so sad that I could never watch it again, because it's got so much joy and love in it that it's like I was okay. It was like it's such a weird way to put it, but it was like an okay sad, like
Yeah.
like a happy miserable or something of the, I don't know, but it was like, and then and I had kind of forgot, because a lot of this, one of the other things that this does in general really well is the shot for shots. The things that are, I mean, shot for shot from the video game.
Perfect.
Like, this is how you do a video game adaptation.
This is it.
This is the new standard for like how you follow through with this. And so I had kind of like, when they're getting ready, when Ellie and Joel show up and they're getting ready to take the car, or the truck, I'm not really thinking about the window thing, or I'm not thinking about like how bad it's about to fuck me up when I see it. totally catches me off guard. And they do that zoom out or whatever, and I was just like, oh god damn it. Come on. That hurt so much more this time. Like
it did.
It was so good. Yeah, so that was like that was one of my like big episode ones I knew for sure I wanted to talk about, because that was like one of my favorites. What did you have a favorite episode?
So it's it's whichever one I'm thinking about at the moment.
Fair.
I I really
All of them.
3 was a big one for me. I I really liked both 7 and 8.
7 and 8 were good.
So I think those were like, and it's hard
8.
to
Ooh, yeah.
and 1, I guess. So it's like a top and bottom tier, but the bottom tier is so close to the top tier because they're all phenomenal episodes, you know.
Sure. No, they are. Yeah. Well, it's like those tier systems where there's like multiple in the same row. You know? Where it's like, this is the top tier and it's all 9 episodes. Hey, what's up, Porpine? Yeah, a good series. I don't like the word good. You should edit that. It should say fantastic, amazing, great, wonderful, perfect.
I'll be stunned if this is not my series of the year.
Yeah, no, I have no doubts that this is probably gonna make my top list for the year in general, because I just can't imagine that many more things coming out that are gonna hit this, like the nostalgia, the just all of the things that kind of go into this, as well as being a new experience, because they do change enough that there are some things that are different, that are just enough, like episode 3, for example. Yeah, no, I think, and I think the other thing is, like, it's hard sometimes, I think, to watch things where, like, they're supposed to be really big arcs, like Ellie and Joel's relationship is a really big arc, but so is their individual journeys, because he starts out in a very different place with their situation than she does, obviously. And then over time, they get to a certain point, and then there's something that happens that drives them apart again. And it's like, it's so well done that they have a lot of one-on-one conversations, but there's only a couple of times that are just the one-on-one in between all the crazy other sad stuff that happens, where they really connect on a different level, and you really get to see them as they are on the inside versus how they're portraying on the outside. And that's, like a couple of examples would be like the conversation, obviously, where Joel finally tells her about his scar. The conversation around, oh my God, I'm drawing a total blank. What's the little boy that turns? What is his name?
Sam.
Henry.
Henry.
Sam is the brother, right? The older brother.
Okay. Yes.
Either or.
Yes.
I can't remember. But the time after that they have like a conversation, and then that first time she makes him laugh right before they meet Sam and Henry with those stupid puns. Like, they're just these perfectly crafted, very short moments where they interact, and they're so well done. Like, you get such an idea of their relationship, how it's changing. Thank you. Henry is the brother. Henry. Sam was the kid. You were right. Sorry.
Okay.
Sam. Thanks. But I think that, like, I think like that was just so fucking well done, though, to get that in those scenes.
And yeah, the pun book.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so good anyway, but when she finally gets them to laugh, I think that was such a beautiful moment.
I laughed with them. I felt like I was a part of it, like I was in a sleeping bag off to the left somewhere. Like, I felt like I was a part of it. It was like so warm and cozy in that moment. And then you're like, oh, fuck, that's it. That's out the window.
We're done with that now. And I think that was one of my most frustrating moments, because I was like, there was a teeny tiny part of me that was like, oh, we're just going to have one episode that ends on a fucking good note.
And I know. It's like,
and it's like, God damn it.
It's not how that went at all. And then and it's hard. And that's, and again, with Sam, that's another thing. Like, so when I first saw them, I was like, Oh yeah, like, you know, and then I got kind of wrapped up in the action and the other crazy lady, I'm drawing a total blank on her name too. Y'all already, if you're not new here, Angel is terrible with character names. Even ones that I love and know, I don't know what they are. I know Joel and Ellie, I know the main ones. What is her the girl from Coyote Ugly, her character's name? The crazy one, it's like something with a K maybe.
Oh,
I don't know.
Kathleen?
Kathleen, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say Coyote Ugly. And I got weirdly caught up on that.
She was the best friend in Coyote
I was
Ugly.
like, I was trying to figure out what was going on in Coyote Ugly instead of listening to the rest of the sentence. The crazy
Sorry.
lady, Kathleen. It's on me.
That was a little jarring, I apologize. Yeah, so her like I got wrapped up in all of that shit that I just kind of like forgot again. And then we get to I will say this. Kathleen sucks. Like, I mean, you're not supposed to like her, but she did such a great job at making me fucking hate her.
That was another thing I think the show did really well. Kathleen might be my favorite example of it.
Yeah.
David is another one where it's like
Yes.
there were these characters that
And they just
in the game they were just kind of like evil almost for the sake of being evil, like
yep,
comic levels of evil.
yep,
And I think they don't humanize Kathleen. Like, you don't feel bad for her, but
nope.
they make her feel more well-rounded like a person.
And
And
the show, you mean?
yeah, in the show.
Yeah.
And you feel, well, yeah. And I think that's just like, because it's not just like, oh, the city is evil and they're gonna like run us out or kill us. It was
Yeah,
like
there's more
she
to it.
has a vendetta, and we get to see why, and we get to see the lengths she'll go to, and
Oh my god, yeah. That
that was
scene
so
where
well
she's,
done.
like, in their old house or whatever, and she's, like, saying that little, like I forget exactly what she says. I've only watched it one time all the way through so far. But the specific thing that she's talking about is she's talking about the difference in who she is compared to her brother, and that put like
Yeah,
a fucking chill in my spine. The way she just, I mean, she killed that role. Like I don't know the
she did.
actress's name, but she did a phenomenal job, and because she the way she turned that light off as far as like that just like blank, I don't know, it was like fucking scary. I was like
And
she is scary, like she's scary.
And it was a double whammy because it's like you think that she's having like a confessional moment where they're going to be
What?
like, step down, and
Yes,
then the guy following her is like, did we follow him or did we follow you? And it's like,
you.
holy shit, like, no, don't follow her more. Like,
Yeah, no, I know what you
after
mean.
hearing that,
Yeah.
oh my god.
Yeah, and the guy that plays Pierce, her right-hand man as it were,
Yeah.
he's somebody in the game too, I think. The guy that plays him, I'm so confident he voices somebody in the game, but I am drawing a total blank as to who it is. But he was one of the first ones we meet, though. I think. Yeah, I think he's the first one we meet that was a voice actor from
Oh,
the
that's
game
cool.
that's in the world because there's at least three or four.
Yeah.
And obviously we'll get to the really big obvious ones in a minute. But so that was I didn't know that though. I always watched the after things after the episode, how it would like do the behind the scenes and it would talk about what went into the episode, and then they were talking about how they kind of tweaked Pierce for the show, and they're talking about all of that. And then they were like, yeah, because he's so and so in the game. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't know he was in there. I didn't recognize his voice because the other two voices I would know anywhere. But this one I didn't recognize off the top of my head. But so that was really cool. But the scene where they all meet up outside when
Mhm.
Kathleen and Pierce and their little groupies or whatever minions, and then we've got Joel is up in the house with the like eyes on the scene, and then there's Ellie, Sam, and Henry on the ground. That scene was so fucking good with the collapse of the street and the infected. Oh my god, that was so good.
They really escalated that. And it was the thing that I noticed replaying the game today, because it was like I I remember watching the show And there were a lot of details where it was like other than like there were shot for shot moments where it's like I remember this from the game because it was really powerful and like they
Sure.
got it perfectly in the show.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was like it was more of like a vague impression where it's like this was a little bit different, you know. They
Yeah.
changed the timeline here. It was like very subtle, and it was I remember watching the show and being like, this scene really escalated. But what I noticed playing the game today is that not it is an escalation because the whole street collapses and it's like a big scene. It's actually very condensed because they took that from like several different scenes of the
Yeah.
game. It's like things that are and they like mash them all together and it was very effective.
It was, especially well, and two, the other thing is because it was, in the game, there's the story elements, obviously. That's like the
Yeah.
strong one of the strongest components of the game, but there's the survival aspect too, where you're like actually playing and you have to hide and you have to kill things and you have to do all these things. And so this was a lot less action to your point because it had to be a cinematic experience. It
Yeah.
couldn't be a survival horror TV show. That's not really like feasible, I don't think. And so to the way this kind of because we just got hit after hit episode wise, emotion, 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 because this is after episode 3. When all of this like gets to that point where that happens, it's like we get like kind of wrapped up again and the action and the reality that yes, the people are scary, but also like
Yeah.
you know
Just a little reminder.
yeah, and it was good though because I really liked I will this is a general complaint and it's not, honest to God, it's not even a big one. I really would have liked more action. As
Mhm.
far as the infected are concerned, I really would have liked a little bit more, but I do have to say that as well, like as much as few scenes as we have with infected throughout, they were all like, I mean, they couldn't have been more perfect. The
No.
introduction of the fucking clickers, my heart like was like in my throat. Oh,
I
hey Lexi. Hi, thanks for
Hello.
coming by. Yeah, no, I thought I was gonna throw up my heart. Like I was so stressed out.
I don't think we've talked about this yet. It's going to come up a lot as we continue to talk about video games
Okay.
on this show, like over the course of the series. The one thing I cannot do in a game as a gamer, my biggest weakness is stealth mechanics. I'm bad at them.
Same,
Um, so
same. I'm gonna
I didn't
die a lot.
real I remember, like, thinking that I did pretty well in The Last of Us for a game that had stealth mechanics,
Mhm.
but I had when the clicker showed up, it felt like I think I have a little bit of, like, stealthing PTSD because I got so physically tense when that thing showed up. It's like, I have to hold so fucking still, like, it's gonna get me. I was like, I feared for my life when that thing showed up.
Yeah, more infected. Yeah, I agree. I do think I'm hoping that whenever we get into part 2 that there will be more of it because honestly, and I think it's a good thing that we wanted more because I think that's a testament to how good it was when we got it. But that
Yeah.
clicker scene had me literally ready to throw up. Like I was so stressed. And I know what you mean because I almost felt like I had to hold my breath and lean
Yeah.
in and like you're like, "Oh, like it was so well done."
And, like, my hands went in, like, I like, I, like, needed to have my hands on a controller that was
It
not
was so
there, and it
stressful.
just
And I think it was probably a little bit worse because you genuinely didn't have control over the scene.
yeah. It's like, there's nothing I can do here.
I just have to watch it unfold. That scene was so great though. I loved it so much.
It
And
was
then
so
of course the big guy, what are they? They have a name, don't
the
they, in the game? The big
bloaters.
one. The blood. Yeah. That was great. He just, I mean, like I won't animate for purposes of I have a sense of humility. But like his motions when he like gets up out of that thing, I was like, they are fucked. This whole group of people is fucked.
I know, and that was the other thing, and it would have irritated me, except for it was so well done. 'Cause
Mhm.
they make a big deal about clickers, like, when they're introduced. They have, like, the discussion, you get to hear their name in the show and stuff, and then a bloater just fucking shows up
Like
and is like,
nobody's
"Deal
I
with
know.
it." And it's like, oh, oh no.
Oh no.
What is that? Yeah, and like Ellie panics and it's like that's correct. That's like what you do if you see that
That is the
thing.
appropriate amount of concern. That was so good though. And the little girl that does the crawling in the car,
Oh my god, yeah.
so good. That's so
They need to get her a show. Just that was
yeah.
creepy as fuck.
She was so creepy. And then yeah, that scene is great. I really liked and I think too like these staged out like I guess some of them not so much, but essentially these big moments with these specific characters are almost like boss battles, you know? It's like you're
Yeah.
setting up, you know, because these are the big bads for the time frame that we're in right now. And so then they're the bad ones. And then that's like, this is our big showdown with them. And then we can move on to the next part, you know, of the story. But I thought I thought the one with Kathleen and Pierce was really good. I loved going back to like some of the action and even some of the game elements with him like shooting from the window. I thought that was
Yeah.
really good.
It was. And it's I think that the infected being there to the extent that they were was a very good subversion of expectation because like we were just talking about, a lot of the horror element actually comes in with how humans treat each other. And I think it's very interesting that the one arc that was set up very intentionally with like the different human dynamics ended
Mm-hmm.
up being a fight with the infected because it's
Right.
like, at that point you weren't really expecting it, you
No.
know?
No,
You
you're
gotten
thinking,
so
oh my
wrapped up
God, like
and
there's so many of them. Like, how are they going to get out of this? Especially too, like, I don't know what it would have like what it was like for people to watch this that didn't know again anything about the game, but to go into this not knowing anything about what was going to happen, what like because that scene sets us up for what happens later that night.
yeah.
And that scene, you know, Ellie is very she's not open is not the correct word, but she's very you know, she is willing to talk, willing to interact, even if she still has walls up. Because, like, even with Joel, I think she's cautious of like her emotions and that kind of thing. But, you know, by this point, you know, we've lost Tess, which was like Joel's other connection to his sense of humanity. And then this, you know, teenage girl is like thrown on him and he's like, no, this is like the mission, right? But like we start getting a sense of like the way Ellie is with different people because we now seeing her with Sam is a piece of her we haven't really gotten to see yet. You know, this like
Yeah.
this child like kind
She
of
gets to be a
interaction.
kid.
Yeah, that she never got to have before.
Yeah.
And I loved that.
I really liked how I liked seeing her and Sam bond over the comic as
That
much as
was
they did. I mean, I didn't like it by the end. It
I know
hurt.
what you mean though.
But
Yeah, it was really great. And yeah, and I think like the it's just another thing. Every time you had two characters together one on one, the moments are so short lived, but they're impactful because even the conversation with Henry and Joel, you know, Joel is like, you know, fuck everybody. Like, I'm not letting anybody in this circle. We got a job. Like, I got a job to do. That's that. This is sort of just like a little nudge of when we start realizing that like there's a little bit softer somewhere in there, right? Because he, you know, they start going back and forth, and this is when, you know, Henry tells him all the stuff, you know, what he did, you know, and why Kathleen was after him, and that his brother was sick, and he's trying to, and all these things. And so he tells him all of that, and then Joel changes like immediately.
yeah. It's really powerful and I mean, I don't want to say that it hits differently the second time through because at having played the game, it's like you already basically know who Joel is as a person. But I do think that extra context where it's like he probably sees a lot of himself in Henry at that point, which I think really explains it. It sheds a different light on the shutting off of
Yeah.
that conversation, you know?
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
And
Yeah.
then and the other big scene I think that context hurts more with is watching Henry shoot himself, where it's like
God.
also knowing that that's something that Joel tried. By the time you get to the
I
end of
didn't
the series,
even think
it's
about
like
that.
that's just
Oh, I
that,
didn't even think about that.
and that's a moment that hit me a lot harder in the show than in the game. Because I think the game, they're very similar scenes, but I think the game plays a little bit more on like, you might also get shot trying to grab the gun. Whereas, and again, it's part of playing a game because it's you're the one that will get shot, but the
Yeah.
show, I think, builds that tension a little bit better where it's like, there's that moment where you realize what Henry's gonna do and that Joel's trying to stop it, and that
Yeah.
episode hurt.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, a reoccurring theme in this is losing people you love, people you care about. And when they're gone, what are you surviving for anymore? And
Yeah.
that's the theme. Literally in every story, Bill and Frank, that's the story with Joel has it multiple times.
Multiple times.
Multiple times. But it's this reoccurring thing of, Kathleen, right? Why
Yeah.
am I questioning that? Kathleen. It didn't sound right when I said it. Kathleen. So Kathleen and her brother, like you start to see the way people process loss in a world like this because
Yeah.
you are fighting for survival, but what are you fighting for? Kathleen's fighting for revenge. Joel tried not to fight anymore, but had second guesses. He finds work to do to occupy his brain. And when Sam turns and has to be killed, Henry no longer has a purpose. What is he living for without his brother?
And that parallel, it hurts so much because all the things that Henry has done to keep Sam alive. And it's not just that he's lost Sam, it's that he's ruined everything he's believed in to keep someone alive who he had to kill. And which again, really strong parallel with that final episode where it's like, poor Joel.
As soon as you started saying that, I was like, oh shit, you're right. That connects to, yeah.
I just, that episode hits differently.
Oh my God. And then, the night of, he shows, he and Ellie are talking. He's deaf and mute. He's talking, right? Yeah. And so so they're communicating back and forth, and she tells him that like her blood is medicine.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh my God. Like, and so she cuts her hand and she puts her blood on his wound. And there's like I'm telling you, there was a moment in me where I was like, oh, he's saved.
Where you just want it to work so bad.
God. Yeah. And then they wait, she wakes up and he's like sitting on the bed, not responding. And you're like, oh God damn it. Like, and that whole scene. Yeah. And then the thing I think like it seems maybe like a small thing, but it really like resonated with me was that moment when Henry kills himself. There's the second when it shows Ellie on the floor, and she jumps in reaction to it, to like what she is singing and feeling all at this one time, and there's no time to process any of it. No time. And so, when they wrap up they bury them, and she leaves the thing on the grave marker, and it says like, I'm sorry, I think, or and you're just like, God, I can't.
That hurts so bad. And you don't even really know if she's apologizing for not being able to save him, if she's apologizing for falling asleep, if she's, there's just like that deep.
It could be a few things.
Yeah. And you feel so bad for her because there's, what could she have done?
Yeah, that was like her first connection to innocence since she was a baby.
Yeah.
And they had a friendship already, a very close one, and it was over in 24, 48 hours. Like, it was over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That episode hurt.
It did. And then it's crazy because, like, again, you know, Joel and Ellie emotionally are never on the same page. They're always at different parts of the journey and it's never at the same time. And so, like, this is when he is starting to soften, and this is when Ellie is starting to harden. This is like that episode, or that, well, and losing them specifically, Henry and Sam, is a changing thing in both of them for the rest of their lives. And this is when we start seeing the change. You know, we got that little glimpse of them kind of bonding, and thankfully, like, we still get to see that because I absolutely love those scenes. But you can tell that this is where this change of everything really started, was with this particular death, with these two particular deaths.
Yeah.
Ugh.
heavy stuff. This show.
Yeah. No, it totally is. And then yeah, and so I think the next big one, right, is Tommy and Tara from True Blood. What is her character's name? Anyway, when we meet, so he goes to he goes on this search, right? This is what starts with him trying to find Tommy episodes ago, before this point. Yeah. But they finally decide, like, you know, like, okay, like, this is what we're doing. So they go out and they're trying to find Tommy, and right, that's next, right? Am I crazy?
Yeah. You're right.
Okay, making sure I'm not missing anything. You can totally tell me if I am.
I don't think so.
I think that's the next big thing, is they go from that to it starts becoming, winter has now started, and like that's when we start getting so they have like that short scene in the cabin, which I thought was funny, with the older couple. Yeah, and but they get closer, they get told about the people, like, to stay away from that, whatever it is, the river or whatever.
River of Death, yeah.
River of Death, yeah. And they're like, oh no, there's like no infected. And then literally, like, the moment that the characters realize is, like, that's when we see the horsemen show up, all the people on horses. And that, I will tell you this, that scene with the dog
made me nervous, especially because it was like, and it was little changes like that just kind of added to the thing, because they're already, like, in the game, they're at the gate, you know, when they figure out, when they're almost sniped to death, and it's like, you know, and it's, you know, the trajectory of the game, you know what has to happen, you know, to follow those basic plot points, but then you see a new element added, and it's like, shit, I don't know what happens with dogs. Like,
I don't like change.
Yeah, it made me so nervous.
Yeah, because it's like, in the moment you're thinking, like, at least for me, I was so stressed out. I was like, that dog's about to kill her. She's about to die right here in the snow by a dog. Like, that's what, and that moment where, you know, because this show is filmed so beautifully. It is focused on Joel and his like anticipation for, I'm about to try to kill everybody to protect her. What the fuck am I gonna do? And so, and then you hear her giggle.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, thank God.
But it was so nervous because you couldn't see her, and it's like, what's the dog doing? What's she doing? Like,
oh my God. And then it shows her playing and rolling around the dog, and I was like, oh, I just knew everybody was about to die, and that was going to be roll credits. No way. Oh, that scene was so smart. It was so good. It didn't even last that long, but man, it was effective.
Yeah. They had a lot of good moments like that, where it's like, they didn't have to do much, but they got it right.
Yeah. And some of that does rely a lot on how you feel about the characters, because I will tell you that those kind of moments only ever happen after they've suffered something awful. Like, and you're like, come on, man, we just got through like all this shit with these. Please just give us a fucking break. There are no breaks in The Last of Us. And for anyone watching who's wondering, it's the same way in the next one. So it'll be just as, you know, emotionally invested, or you'll be just as emotionally invested. So then we get, you know, Tommy and Joel get reunited, which I will say, I don't think, I don't know what it is. I'm not super invested in them, like, as siblings. Like, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, we have like, or, you know, he's like, oh, this is my, like, I've got to find my brother. He finds his brother. They're reunited. But I'm just kind of like, eh. Like, I wasn't as like, I thought it would be different seeing it, as a show versus, but it just wasn't as like, it didn't really like hit any chords with me.
So I do think I don't even really want to call it like a weak link in the show.
Yeah.
Because I think it's improved upon from the game. Because they set it up better in the show,
Yeah.
They have codes, and he's already looking for Tommy. That's something that he wants to do
Right.
in
Before that. Yeah.
advance. And
Yeah.
I think the setup was better. It did make me a
Mhm.
little bit more invested in the
Mhm.
two of them. I think getting to see them interact a little bit before everything went down helped some.
Yeah.
But it was one of Joel's relationships that I cared about a little bit less.
Yeah.
And I don't even really that might not be a bad thing, I think it's one of those things in his life where they've kind of had a falling out, and Tommy's no longer the most important thing by the time he makes it to Tommy, which I think is maybe okay, but I
Yeah.
see what you
Yeah.
mean. Like,
Yeah. Well, and I think too, what it is, I mean, all the plot points in the journey have a reason that they happen. And I think his reason for going there is that's when things change
yeah,
between him and Ellie again, because that's when they have like that iconic scene in the bedroom, which I loved when the creators were talking about filming that scene. They said we didn't want to change a single thing about it, and they didn't.
yeah,
It's
they
word for
didn't.
word, verbatim, exactly what happens in the game. And so but that scene, and then the scene later when he's at the horse and he's like, gives her the choice, which is ironic, but we'll get there. Gives her the choice, and it's like that's a big deal, because that's the first time she's saying to him, like, you make me feel safe. I
Yeah,
feel safer and better when I'm with you. And I think, like she's being vulnerable in a way we haven't gotten to see her be yet.
no,
And I think that is literally the whole purpose of that storyline, is just to give them a reprieve, a safe building, if you will, to have that moment of like, I'm really starting to connect with you. Whatever this is that I'm feeling, like, I feel safe with you. And
yeah.
that's not something that she had ever communicated, because she just blows everything off. That's her defense mechanism. Everything is a joke. Everything is a fuck this and fuck that. And that's just who she is, you know? And so this is like, God, I cried the whole time.
Yeah.
Literally the whole time.
I do think this is a low bar to clear. I do think that might be the episode where I cried the least, but
Agreed.
there were waterworks involved. Like, it
Yes.
was still,
That scene, I think, I'm trying to think, because that episode ends after they reconnect at the end of the stables when they're supposed to be separating and they go out together. That's where it
yeah.
ends, I think. So yeah, that part was
Okay.
the only part that had me. But I think it's literally everything around it only existed. You know what really did piss me off? And I know, like, this is just a general feeling in general about this plot point in the story.
Okay.
But the Tommy baby thing, that conversation that they have when he tells Joel, that he's going to be a dad. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm like, you couldn't think of nothing else to say, right? You couldn't wait. Like, I feel like they just got there. Like, now is not the time, like, to be
Yeah.
talking. Anyway, I was so angry at Tommy. I was like, you know what he's been through? I don't give a fuck that it was 20 years ago. You lose a kid, you ain't never getting over that shit. Like, but that
Yeah.
whole thing, like that interaction,
I
it's like, ugh.
That's one of those, I don't want to call it a miscommunication, because they both knew what was going on, but it's something that really bothers me in media, where it's like willful malintent, I guess, where it's just like the two of
Yes.
them are just like, where, because I didn't mind that he brought it up, because it's like Joel's gonna find out eventually. Bad timing, bad approach, but he did it. It's fine. Joel reacts poorly, and then Tommy gets really mad about it and like holds a grudge, and it's like, how did you think he was going to react? Like, it's
I
one thing to
mean,
say it anyway, but like,
yeah, and then there was something he said too. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he takes like a jab at Joel. Like, he says
yeah,
something in reference to, like, him having his own life. I can't remember
just
exactly what
because
he
your
said.
life is over doesn't mean mine has to
And you're
be. And
just
it's
like,
like,
just kill him right now. I'm like, I don't even care. I don't care. Like, I was so angry, and I felt like, I don't know, like, it just, like, that part was so, that was a hard pill to swallow. And I was
yeah.
like, who the fuck do you think you're talking to? Like, I was so angry. I was so angry at that part.
I and
Yeah.
it's really weird because that was a moment that made me angry in the game too, but in a different way. I was like,
Oh,
cause it, yeah, cause in the game it's more of like a Tommy gets like kind of upset that Joel has showed up at all. Like they greet each other fine, and then
there's
they
like
get in
weird
there,
tension.
and Tommy tells him that like 'cause he gets really defensive about Joel killing people. He, like, approaches that topic in that scene, like, in the bar, and then he's like, I didn't I didn't ask for you to save me," and Joel's like, "The things that I did kept you alive," and he's like, "Well, it wasn't worth it," and it's like, "Okay, dude,
Yes.
I
Yeah. Calm down.
yeah," like,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know what you
and
mean. I
then,
think,
like, that
yeah.
scene, I think, also ends because that's when the town gets raided. I think that scene also ends with him asking Joel if he still knows how to kill people. And it's like,
Or
you're still
something
asking
like,
him to save you. Like, what the fuck, Tommy?
I think it's, their reunion, I guess, is a little bit different. And I think, like, I there's something like, when she's getting her hair cut after
Yeah.
she's like cleaned up and everything, and they're interacting with each other. I love these things that Ellie just says to people in defense, like, of her and Joel. And she's like, I already know he killed people. She's like, I already know that. Like no big deal. That was, that was on his intro bio. Like I knew, like, so. And I think, and of course, this is all, that conversation is also where she learns about Sarah, and because he obviously does not talk about Sarah. And so that when that scene, all of these emotions really, because you've got the conversation with Tommy and Joel that happened separate about the baby and stuff, about what's her name being pregnant. And then you have the separate conversation with Ellie and the mommy to be about Joel. And so everybody's got all these emotions and thoughts and things in their head. So when they're both in that room and that scene happens, it's very explosive from an emotional standpoint, because she says Sarah's name and he is like, oh fuck no. Like his
Yeah.
entire demeanor, he acted that. I mean, he's phenomenal anyway, but he acted the fuck out of that part, because he was straight up like, I'm sorry, hold on. Like his shoulders square, like his entire demeanor shifted. Like,
Everything
you
changed.
don't get to say that to me. Like, that scene was so good. Like, all of the build up for all of that stuff, with all the different conversations and the running back in with, coming back in and seeing Tommy and all that stuff, all sets us up for that, like, really great scene.
Yeah.
And then, obviously he's like, oh, well, Tommy's going to take you. You're better off with him. Because he's had a couple of episodes, we'll call them panic attacks. He's had a couple of episodes where he's like, oh, I can't do this shit anymore. Like, I'm too old. Like, you'll be safer with Tommy. And she's like, that's when she, of course, is like, well, I don't want to be, I'm only safe with you, blah, blah, blah. So then, of course, the next morning when she gets ready to go, Joel is out there with the horses, and he's like, you deserve a choice. And she's like, let's go. Like, she doesn't even, like, he barely gets the sentence out of his mouth, and she's like, let's go, and I love that. I was like, it's just so
good.
cute. Like, I'm like, oh, I love these two so much. They're so great.
They are. They are.
Yeah. And then, oh yeah. Okay. So then I was trying to think of what was next. Yeah. So then we get to, where they're back on track. They're going to go try to find the fireflies, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've seen this, the show Arcane League of Legends on Netflix. It's based off of the game League of Legends.
That's why I didn't watch it. I remember playing League of Legends, and
the show is so,
I know people keep telling me to watch the show, and it's like, yeah, I think I've had enough League of Legends for my entire life.
it's so good. I didn't play League of Legends though. I don't like
Yeah.
games like that. That's not my cup of tea, but the show is like, it is so good. So I say, the only reason I'm even bringing it up is because in this show, there are these freedom fighters and these bugs called firelights. So every time I go to say fireflies, I keep wanting to say firelights, and I have to keep catching myself in general conversation, even not on this. But anyway, so yeah, so like, okay, we're gonna go to the college. They're gonna go to the university to find the okay, so this was another part that I had completely forgotten about. I remembered the stuff after. But I didn't remember the lead up to it as far as like going into the school and the university and stuff. I'd kind of forgotten about some of that, but this was another part. There's a lot of them, but this was another part that had some really great like shot for shot sections of like from the game to the show. And from the game to the show. And did the monkeys scare you? They scared me.
No, I don't think that they were as scary in the show, because in the in the game they build them up a little bit. They're like, it is kind of like a jump scare in the show. They don't give you as much time to try and figure out what's going on. But in the game, I remember it's like, you hear like the rattling from different points in the thing, and it's like, is it fireflies? Why would they be hiding? Is it infected? Why would they be hiding? And it's like a mystery. You're like, what kind of fucked up infected are they about to show me? And then they open the door and it's monkeys, and you're
which is great though. It's like a comic. It's almost like a comic relief moment of like, okay. Because like, and that's like a horror movie trope. Like this build up for something and then ends up being something stupid or nothing at all. Because I was like, oh, like I was like amped for it. And while they're there, we see the raiders coming, as it were. We have no idea who they are. They just show up. And yeah, they try to leave and they get attacked. So at this point, God, okay, so this all happens like really, really fast, and then the episode ends. So this was like but yeah, so they get attacked, they fight him off, but Joel gets wounded pretty badly. He gets shanked essentially with a I don't know, was it a screwdriver? What was it? Something like that. Like
something.
Some fashioned together something though. Whatever it wasn't like a traditional, fighting utensil. It was like something made.
It does. It looks like a full shiv.
There we go. Shiv.
Like it's been sharpened.
Yeah, like somebody spent time making it dangerous. And so he's able, like Ellie is able somehow to help him get up on the horse. She gets on the horse and they're right off. She shoots off, some rounds, whatever, and they ride off into the sunset. And then of course the episode ends with him falling on the snow, and you're just like, so emotional. You're just like, these poor human beings. Like, what? At this point, I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I would never make it in a post-apocalyptic world. Like, I would never survive. I would give up so easily. I would be like, you know what? Not worth it. I've been stabbed 30 times, shot 40 times, almost bitten 75 times. I give up. There's no showers or TV. I'm out. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah, there were moments in this where it's and it's never, I would give up, I think maybe even easier than that, because it's never the stuff, I'll watch people get like stitched back together, and it's I could do that. But then like I saw the one that really got me, it's in the next episode, or no, it's the episode after that, where Ellie's like bringing him water. And she has to like scoop the snow into a bucket with her bare hands, and it's like, I wouldn't do that now to save my life. Like, I don't like cold. Like, I'm not gonna sleep in an abandoned building. I'm not gonna camp outside in Colorado.
I'm not making it through that shit.
Yeah, I'd be dead.
I totally agree. I think, and this was the part that I remembered the most vividly from the game, was this next section. Yeah. When, we see, because the next episode, it starts off with them in this house, like he's like on the floor and she's trying to take care of him. But this is our flashback episode, right? To the mall? Yeah. Because up to this point, we don't know anything about Ellie's background or how she got infected. We don't know any of that yet. And so Yeah, so this okay, this is another favorite episode. I loved this episode so much.
I liked
Um,
this. It felt a lot like episode 3 for the way that it went back and
Agreed.
expanded on something from the game, because she does tell the story at the end. Like, this is all canon material, but this is the first
Right.
time that we're seeing it, and
Actually in full, yeah. Yeah, and the girl that they cast to play Riley did a
Mhm.
phenomenal job. She
She
was
did.
because Bella Ramsey acts their ass off when they're on camera, and so they
Yeah.
needed somebody that could match that, and they said that in one of the after episodes. Then you're like, oh, we needed somebody that could do this, could act at that level and be on camera with this person and not seem like they're a background character, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we get this flashback to her being in the Fedra school or whatever,
Yeah.
a military school, and we meet basically we meet Riley, and Riley's like escaped and come back, and she thought she was dead. She was super worried about her. And they're obviously besties and they're very close. And it's already hinted, that they were really close even before that, because the girl that she puts in the hospital wing was like, oh, your little friend's not here anymore. What are you going to do? Whatever. And I guess she showed her. And so, um, anyway, so yeah, so Riley's like, oh, I've got this really cool thing to show you. Let me take you and show you. And she tells her that she's a firefly.
Fly.
I almost said it again. Fire, not a firelight. That's a different show. A firefly. And she's like, oh my God, like that whole like thing. And then, my first, like, I think if I like watching this blind, my first inkling to anything would have been Ellie's reluctance to change, where she was
Yeah.
like, and I only say that because, and maybe that's irrelevant, but hear me out. I remember knowing things were different about me when I was younger and being very self-conscious about that stuff, because I knew, that I was different in that regard.
Yeah.
And so like, I remember being really cautious of like me changing, being around other girls changing. And so I was always like really weird about that. And so when I saw that scene, I was like, yep.
And I No, I think that's exactly what it is though. Because there's even a line in there where Riley's like, You're so weird
You're
about
so
that."
weird
And I
about
think the
that.
fact that they draw attention to it, like,
That was the intention, or that was the point rather. Yeah.
yeah.
And so this is one of the coolest sets too, is the mall. So they
Oh, I
get
love them all.
they get to the mall, and I'm like, I love abandoned malls. Like there's just something so creepy and like awesome about them at the same time. And this was done like, oh my God. I don't know what mall it was. I don't think it was all built up, right? I'm pretty sure it was a actual mall that they just changed the inside of, right? Had to be.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, because there's too many stores and stuff, I would think, for it to be like, I mean, I don't know. People have done crazier things. But anyway, I digress. So there's kind of they go inside the mall and they get to do these, like, she tells her she's gonna show her the 7 wonders of the mall.
It starts as 4, and then
Oh, it
Ellie
starts
counts
as
the
4, I'm sorry.
escalator.
Yeah, and then she gets to the escalator and she was like, is this number 1? She was like, the 5 wonders of that part was so cute, because
It was so cute.
you forget how little they, like, anybody
I
their age, like,
Um, that was one thing, like, I'm glad that this came around because I forgot to talk about it, in episode. There was so much to talk about in episode 3, I completely forgot. One big difference between Ellie in the game and Ellie in the show that I
mhm.
really like is that they made Ellie, like, without making her seem incompetent at any point, they made her seem a lot more, like, awed by former technology that she wouldn't have had a chance to
Oh,
experience.
yes.
I played the game today, and there were a lot of lines I just didn't remember where, like, they're teaching her how to drive the car because it's a
Mhm,
stick shift and they're trying to, like, rev the battery back up, and she's like,
mhm.
"I know how to pop a clutch," and it's like, why would Ellie know how to pop a clutch?
Oh, right,
Like,
versus in the show, it
in
was
the show,
very
she's so
naive of it.
excited to be in the car, and she's so excited to see the
Learn.
escalators and.
Yeah, and the few things that she does know, she's like, "Oh, yeah, well, I know because I read this," or like, there's
Yeah.
at least a path of logic to follow. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think
And And I think they didn't like I don't think that they made her seem any more ignorant or dumb or, they
Yeah.
didn't play into it too hard. They just like they gave her a reasonable set of skills
It's
for her
realistic for
background.
what the
And
situation is. Yeah.
yeah, I really
Yeah.
liked that. I thought that was a subtle change that made a big difference.
Yeah, because she was born 5 or 6 years into
Yeah.
the end of the world, basically. So all of that stuff, like, yeah, and that's a good point, because even with like some of the escalator thing was really funny, and then the carousel was like one of my favorite scenes too, because it was just this
Yeah.
like, this was also when I was like, like I'm like, this is like a fucking date. This is so cute right now. And it made my heart happy. And so I was like, this is so cute. And I loved, like, God, and talk about chemistry. Like, Joel and Ellie have a lot of chemistry, but Riley and Ellie did too. Like that,
They did.
every second of conversation and like everything about them felt real. Like all of it.
And it felt real. I really like that they found a good balance of just these two being close, these two being friends, Ellie maybe wanting something a little bit more than friendship, but also the fundamental differences in belief, because at this point Ellie still really believes in Fedra,
Yeah.
and she's just had this pep talk. She's just kind of like reapplied herself
To
to
the
be a
idea.
commander in Fedra, and
Yep.
I really like the balance that they had, where they could kiss at any moment, they could fight at any moment,
You
like
really don't know, because
yeah.
when she's talking about Riley being a Firefly, she's very like frustrated by it. Like she
Yeah.
still very much cares for her, still wants like to be close to her, but she's torn. You can tell that she's torn,
You
because
can
she's like, "Oh,
tell.
you're just going to let them blow me up?" Like she says things like this, and you're just like, "Yeah, it's a fair question." Like you're on opposite, like this is such a terrible thing to compare it to, but honest to God, it's the first thing that came to mind. It's like a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, where it's like
It
division of
is.
families.
It really is though, and I think they did a really good job. And in that typical Ellie fashion, we get to see the start of her making light of it, making jokes. Like she's got a lot of little quips, but that frustration is like she hasn't gotten good at hiding it yet. That frustration is
No.
right there on the surface,
Agreed.
and
Yeah.
it's like I that was some phenomenal acting from everyone in
Yeah.
that
No,
episode.
that whole episode was
Those
so
two.
I mean, like, yeah, that's probably another I really liked it. And like they have their big fight or whatever. She gives her the book, volume 2 of the book, or
Yeah,
volume 2 of the
volume
pun
two.
book. And yeah. And like but then they have, like, she sees the bombs in the like kitchen area or whatever the hell they are. And it starts this whole other thing, and she's like, "You know what, fuck this, I'm out." And she's like, "I can't do this, I'm gonna leave." And so she was this after she tells her she's leaving? I can't remember. That's after, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
So
It was after.
yeah, yeah. They have this like, yeah, because they have that big falling out. I'm trying to keep my cat from unplugging my internet. Stop. It's not bath time. Anyway, so yeah, so like they have that big falling out. She gets ready to leave, and then she hears this god awful scream. Well, by this point, we've already seen the infected wake up in the mall. They don't know
Yeah.
that it's there. We know it's there. Those of us who know the game know exactly what the fuck is about to happen. And so I had so much anxiety. They're such assholes. They showed him so early, and then you're just like, any second now, any second. So when you hear the scream, I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, I didn't know where. But then, it ends up being the Halloween. I loved this part. The Halloween store. That was so cool. Like, she's
It
like, I
was.
thought you'd really like it. That part was so cute. And then,
It was.
yeah, I love this next part. And then, yeah, so they get up on the thing and they dance, and they're wearing crazy masks, and they have like this beautiful moment of realization where Ellie, for the first time, realizes that Riley actually has a crush on her too. Because she doesn't, I think she's questioning it up to this point. She's trying to be like, ooh, careful. And so, she's like, so they kiss. Well, Ellie kisses her, and then she apologizes, and Riley says, "For what?" And then they laugh.
Yeah. And it was really sweet for a minute.
For like a whole ass 10 seconds. Yeah, and then the infected makes it in.
This was we were talking a little bit before this about what death was the hardest for us, and it's wild because they didn't even show this one. And there's a moment where you really, because like you're so invested, and you see this so often in like zombie stories where like the two get bit and whatever, and you're like, it's so sad. And there, I had to pause the show for a second because this one just broke me, where I realized, like, there she's like, let's be all poetic and lose our minds together, and you're like, oh, it hurts, they're gonna die, and then you realize Ellie's not going to die.
You do,
Like,
yeah.
Riley's going to turn, and it's just gonna be her, and she's already confessed that the thing she's worried about is ending up alone, and you're like, that one just hurt so bad.
It's got a lot of layers to it. Because you know what scene, or what part of this scene that really got me, that this is when I started, this is the crying part for this episode. When she realizes Riley is looking down at her, and she looks at her arm, and she realizes I have no words as to why this bothered me in a good way so much. But when she goes to wipe the blood, when she goes like, no, 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 and she does this, that is the most realistic response I have ever seen to being bitten by something infected.
Ever.
Ever. And the wiping, I was like, I would literally do the same thing. My first instinct would be like, nope. And so like when she does that, I started being sad. I was like so sad because I was like, oh, like I didn't already know that was gonna happen. But I was like so sad. But she does something about that second where she does that, and her reaction, because she loses her mind for a minute. Like she literally is like, this can't happen to me. Like, oh.
And I think that's why it hit me so hard. Like because her reaction is so realistic and so strong that you forget that she's going to survive. You see her reaction to death, essentially, and you're just like, you buy it so hard. And I think that was the thing that really broke me, because I had forgotten for a second that she makes it, that like the whole thing is a flashback. And
I also forgot. I totally
what the premise of the show is. Like, I had just
being a flashback. Yeah, because they present it in a way that could be, if you could, like if you don't have any prior knowledge, you would think something happened and it's in the future, that Joel died, right?
Yeah.
And now this is the future, and this is but then the bite happens and you're like, oh, that's fucking right. Like, we haven't seen that yet. We don't know what happened to it. And that part was that episode was really, really well done. The acting in that one, because like you said, there is a lot that's happening for us as viewers that Ellie doesn't even know.
Yeah.
And then we're thinking, because then of course, after we see all of this happen, we get the coming back to, she's back, we're back in the house or whatever. And you're just kind of like, you're thinking like, oh, I don't know, so many emotions with this one, because her, like one of her best friends, maybe her first love, her first crush, whatever, her first experience like outside of, a normal, like heterosexual situation. Like there's a lot to unpack with the things that she's feeling. And she has never been able to hold on to anyone ever, like her whole life. And she's so young. And that's that moment, where she, going back to when when Riley looks at her and she realizes that she's infected, that look of like excitement on her face when she kills the infected.
Yeah.
And the immediate shift, like this kid is going places. Like their acting is so fucking believable. So it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Stole the show in Game of Thrones too. Like, very small role, but man, the whole room focused on Bella Ramsey all the time. Like,
I mean, they definitely command the
this,
room.
Like,
that's an odd, like that's definitely true. Like I said, even when you first meet her in this. So yeah, so was that episode 7?
Yeah.
And then the next episode is
with with the cult.
The cannibal cult, as it were.
Cult.
2 things that always come up in post-apocalyptic stories: fucking cannibals and religious tycoons. Always.
Yeah. Always.
So The Last of Us is no different there. Yeah.
I really love the direction that it's not even a different direction that they took it in. I loved how much further they pushed the cult in the show.
Yeah.
And part of it's just that we have more time with the cult, but we also get to see them interacting more. We get scenes, where we get a baseline of what's going on in the cult. We really buy into that religious aspect before he's like, "Oh, I don't worship God, I worship the cordyceps." And you're like,
you're just like,
"Oh no."
Yeah.
No.
Totally misread the room on that one.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah. To your point, because we get to see those interactions between them as individuals, the way he reacts to that girl, after her father's death, and there's a lot of that stuff. Well, and I think this is also where we meet Troy Baker's character, James.
Yes.
And if you're living under a rock, Troy Baker is a very well-rounded voice actor who played Joel in the video game The Last of Us. He is also Booker in BioShock Infinite. He also plays one of my favorite Decepticons, and we won't go down that hole. But anyway, he's fantastic. I absolutely love him. So to get to see him in the world of Joel as James and not Joel was wicked. I loved it. So cool.
Yeah. I will say I'm bad at recognizing people. I got Troy Baker though, so
I know him.
to me.
I know him specifically. And the only reason I knew Ashley when we get to that is because
I knew Ashley also, but
Ashley has been in other things, and I remember because originally Ellie was supposed to be played by someone else, and then they changed it very last minute, which is why Ellie also looks like somebody else. And so but they did try to make her look more like Ashley instead of the original person. And so I remember when all of that was being talked about, and that was why I knew who she was.
Yeah.
I was able to but Troy Baker, I would know him anywhere. So I knew, and he's so funny and he's so down to earth. And I was so excited to see him in the world of The Last of Us as not Joel. That was great. And he's a cult follower or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
A sheep, as it were.
I also, that was one, I think this was the episode that I realized that Ellie, in the moral spectrum, I fall somewhere between Ellie and Joel, because Ellie is a much better person than me. I would have shot both of those men dead.
While they're standing over the deer, you mean?
I think the deer, she handled that situation very well, maybe more calmly than I would have, but I think we would have ended up in the same place.
About not being,
But
and they know who she is.
They know who she is. I think once, because he's after he's everything happens for a reason and I can prove it, and he shows her his hand. She knows he knows who she is, and at that point, that's when I start shooting.
Yeah.
I would have been so afraid of them tracking me that
they can't live.
No. And it's and it's hard to say something like that, because it's obviously that was impacted by the game a little bit. I think that's one aspect that the game did better, is that David helps you navigate a level or two before he tells you that he knows who you are.
You don't know who he is for a little bit longer.
Yeah. You have no context into who he is, and he's been helping, and then he has this reveal, and I understand that pause. But in Ellie's situation in the show, it's that man's dead. I'd kill him. He's so creepy.
Because there is something off in both senses, because I feel even in the game you're kind of
yeah, he's a little bit creepy in the game, but it's
but I think this was the way he speaks and how all of it is just very unsettling. And I think because he reveals, of course, that the raiders that they were attacked by, that they killed one of, was part of their little group or whatever. And the one that they killed was the dad that we learned at the beginning of the episode was the one that they were learn talking about, and yeah, right.
Yes.
Totally agree. Love Troy Baker. And I think it is a very different thing. I did not realize until I started watching all the behind the scenes stuff on them doing the voice acting and stuff for the game, that I realized how much acting is actually involved.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they did full scenes in
Yeah.
with props. Like it was like no joke. But yeah, so I think like when he reveals all of that, that moment of just like fuck. And then he says, what does he say? He says, lower the gun, James.
Yeah.
He tells
Lower
James
the
to
gun,
lower the gun,
James.
and you're like, oh God. Like so
And then James does lower the gun, and it's like, I'm shooting James. I'm shooting James first and then David, like those two.
yeah, take out the one that's got the gun on you first.
Yeah.
And then you take out the other guy that's sitting across from you. And he like legit because the James leaves to go get antibiotics, medicine,
Yeah, the
penicillin. And
penicillin.
so he leaves to go, and he's like, my favorite thing he says is he's like, it's not code, James, just do it.
Just do what
like,
I said.
are we really fucking doing this right now? Like that part was so funny. And so he brings the medicine, and he's like, because Joel is like his stabbing wound is like gross, and so they like, it's not healing. She's like tried to stitch it up, it's a mess. And so he gives them, she's like gives the drugs over, and that whole transfer, he's like, are we really about to let this bitch go? And then I guess you were thinking, is she really about to let these fucking people
Yeah,
go?
I was so, and it's one of those things, I knew what happened, but like I was still, when she doesn't shoot either of them, I was so baffled because it's like I can't understand.
I totally understand.
And
Yeah.
I know she doesn't know what's going to happen, but man, I wouldn't have taken that chance.
Yeah, it's a lot. No, it's a gamble. It's definitely a gamble because they do exactly what you just said. They end up tracking her, and they get to the
Yeah.
house, and she has to like do all that stuff. She gives him the penicillin. She's like, "How do I do this?" And she's like looking at and see, that's another real world application, because when it comes to wounds and medical stuff, suddenly everybody's a doctor in these things. And she was like,
So that's something that I think was really it's something that I think is really well done in a lot of these apocalyptic shows. I would have gotten someone killed at that age because I thought I knew a lot more about medicine than I ever did. And she's like, and she was really nervous about it. She's like, where do I put this? But I would be like, oh, I'm the doctor now. There are no doctors left alive. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I would have gotten someone killed thinking I knew medicine.
yeah, no, for sure. I think I would have probably thought it had to be drained, like consumed by the like I don't know what I would have done. I don't know, but yeah, and of course, like this scene is hard because like Joel is still very much out of it, and she's like, do not fall asleep. She's like yelling at him. She's like they're gonna, if they get in here, I need you to defend yourself. And so she's like putting something against the door to kind of keep them out of the space that he's in, and she tries to leave him away, and then she gets shot at, and she falls down, which was like a moment. And then Ellie gets captured. Joel starts to get some strength back, which I'm pretty sure is gone. This is when we see Dark Joel.
Yeah. And we've heard that there was a Dark Joel. We see glimpses of it. But this is like the full on you don't want to fuck around with Joel.
Yeah, he's like where is she? And then he gets it out of the first guy. He shows him on the map or whatever. He's brutal. And he was like
kneecaps and
oh like, my God, that part was brutal. I was like, every time he did something different, I was like, oh, like so glad that's not me. Yeah, and then the way he kills the other guy was kind of, it's not funny, but it's funny. He's like, he already told me, and he just like kills him. I know. It's so good, but dark and broody, and I loved it. It was so cool to see that on screen.
And speaking of brutal, that was one scene I didn't think that they were going to do as brutal in the show, and they went above and beyond. And then Ellie stabbing David, I did not think any of that was going, and I don't know why, because I've seen an HBO show before. I know that they can get away with stuff, but it's just like,
Well,
man.
Yeah. You know what? I kind of like, it's also his intention with her is a little more subtle, I think, in the game. I think in the
Absolutely.
show, because I was so dumb. I was like, I don't understand. Like, what is that? What is, and then when he pins her hands, I was like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, and yeah, like that whole thing. One of my favorite lines, really quick, backtracking just a little bit, is when she's in the cage after they've captured her. Joel's on his way. We are like screaming for him. Can you please hurry up and get here and save this girl? And so she's already discovered they're cannibals. That they're lying to people about it. He's already talked about who he really worships, all of that stuff. And she gets him real close and she breaks his fingers.
Yeah.
And at this point, he doesn't know her name. She keeps asking, he keeps asking, and she's like, and then she says, Ellie. And he says, what? And she says, you can tell them Ellie is the name of the little girl that broke your fucking fingers. And I was like, oh, like best line of the show.
It was so good.
Such a great addition. Absolutely loved it. Really, really good. And then, obviously they pull her out and she's not complying. She puts a axe in James's throat. His death was so good, by the way. Like he just like slumps down and he's like, I can't, it's just gotta be, it's so interesting to be, because that's Joel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the voice actor of Joel, and he just got like murdered as James. It's just weird. I loved it, but it was weird. Yeah, and then the scene you were talking about with the she lights everything on fire. They're fighting. She gets pinned. Oh my God.
Stabs him a lot of times.
And that emotionless, like, I don't think people really understand what it could take to be in a moment that you're so in character that you can do that blank expression that she did and still be so full of emotion. That look on her face and the emotions we know she's feeling, like, bar none. Like, this is and that's another one that was pretty much shot. That last part was shot for shot from the game, I think. I don't think there was a lot of changes, right? Because I know she, well, except for the trying to undo her pants while the fucking building's burning down. But aside from that, the actual kill, and then we get almost like, I don't know if you felt this way, I felt relief. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, murder him good. Like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it was very cathartic.
Yeah, cathartic. That's the better word. Yes. Yeah.
But also, I had been rooting to kill him for a long time.
I mean, for sure. But it almost felt like we were getting the release with it as well. Like she was. Yeah. Like, I felt like I was a part of the moment again. Like, I was just like, me too. Like, I was there. And and so she goes outside. She's pretty bad. She's beaten up pretty bad. She's emotionally broken, completely broken. Because really, even though she's lived a pretty hard life up to this point, I don't think, as a character, that she really understood how dangerous the world is for women in this instance, because she's 14 at this point, and this grown ass man, like,
everybody's just wanted to kill her, and then
this is different.
One that wants to do something worse, and it's like,
very, very different feelings going along with that. And then this is when I really cried at the end, when she goes outside and Joel touches her and she fucking freaks out, which rightfully so. And he's like, no, it's me. But then he calls her baby girl. Waterworks, like,
yeah. And I think that was when I had made it almost all the way through without crying, and then it got me, like, right at the end.
He's like, oh, it's me, you're okay. I was just like, oh my God. Like, I was I was a mess, an absolute mess. And that takes us into our finale. Right?
Yeah. That takes us into
episode 9. No way could we have done this in an hour.
No way.
No fucking way. Okay. Anyway, so the finale was, I don't even know. I guess
The finale felt like, to me, it felt like it went, because I went into episode 9 and it was like, there's no way that they can, and even knowing that they didn't have that many plot points left to cover, it's like, there's no way they can fit this into one more episode. They needed that extra episode. HBO has a history of rushing the end of things, and I was like, I was really anxious about it.
I also thought it was going to be a longer episode.
Yeah, and then it was like, well, if it's a double length one, and it just, it felt like it went so fast. Like, but they got everything in there. You know, it didn't feel
they got all the major
rushed.
stuff. Yeah, it didn't feel rushed to me. Yeah, so we get to we find the fireflies, and we're finally like brought back to like Marlene and the whole thing. Oh, we start with Ellie, the voice of Ellie from the game, Ashley, very pregnant, coming through the house, running, or through the woods, running from an infected, just one infected. And she gets into this house and she's very pregnant, and it's time, of course. And there was a second where I was like, trying to like feel, I was like, what is happening? I was so confused for a second. Anyway, so the infected comes in, she stabs it. We learn this is Ellie's mother, right? And so which is really cool because, you know, and she said it in one of her interviews, Ashley did, about, you know, giving birth to a character both in a literal sense and then in a not so literal sense. And so I thought that was really cool. And and that's when we get more background on Marlene too, because Marlene is kind of one-dimensional at this point. We don't really she just shows up sometimes, and we talked about her and we know like what the role with it, like trying to get Ellie we know all of that stuff. But this is when we realize that Ellie's mother and Marlene were best friends. And Marlene had to kill her because she did get bitten. And she tells her, what is her name? Anna? No, something with an A. Ashley's character? Anyway, Ellie's mom. When Ellie's mom, when she comes in, when Marlene finds her and there's the baby, she tells her to take her. She's like, her name is Ellie. She needs to be fed. You have to take care of her because I've been bitten. And she looks at her and she was like, I cut the cord before I was bitten. And then Marlene's like, you lying bitch. And she's like, before I was bitten. And she's like daring her to like fucking argue with her. So she takes the baby to one of the guys outside, comes back in and has to kill the mom. And that's our like introduction to baby Ellie. Yeah. Which is rough, to say the least. I mean, obviously, thankfully, Ellie doesn't have the memory of it. But when the baby started crying after the shot went off, I was like, I was like, oh my God, it's like she knows. Like, I was so sad. It was so sad. Anyway, so Joel still isn't in super great shape at this point. He's, I guess, in better shape because of the penicillin, but he's still kind of like slower and stuff. But we get the scenes with them in the hospital. That's after that, right? Did I miss something?
They're on their way.
Oh yeah, so we got this. Oh yeah, we get the giraffe.
Talk about the giraffe. Yeah,
we got to talk about the giraffe. You're right. No, 100%. You're right.
So I actually don't have a lot to say about the giraffe, other than I'm very, very glad that it was there.
I saw something that said it was a real giraffe.
Yeah, out of like all the things that I thought that they maybe weren't going to be able to do, the giraffe was like the first on a list of things I thought was going to get axed. So it was really cool when they're like,
cool, and that's pretty much shot for shot. That part too. And then because at this point, you know, Joel's trying really hard to like engage with Ellie. This is when he's like trying to tell her you don't have to go through with all of this stuff, you know, and he's like trying to tell, like, to bond and be closer and be more open. And she is completely somewhere else. She's miles away. She has just been through this fucking horrible thing that she's not talking about. She's not, you know, she's just internalizing all of it. And then the first time he gets to see her happy again is when they see the giraffe, which was a really cool scene. And then she sees like the family of the giraffes, and that was really cute. And then right after that is when he tells her, like, we don't have to do this if you don't want to. We'll go back stay with Tommy. You can live out your life. You don't have to do this. And she's like, why? But why? But then what? Like, if I don't do this, like, it could save people. Why don't I? Like, all of these reasons. And we get to why we have this conversation. And then, shortly after that, he tells her that he about the scar on his face and that he had tried to kill himself and he got a little twitchy with it and it didn't happen. And that's what the scar is from. And it's literally like they have swapped places. He is trying so hard to invest and be open and vulnerable and like there with her in a moment. And she is literally like miles apart, miles away.
I think that was really powerful. I think that this is a conversation that was framed better in the show. It's one of those rare moments where I think the show really did do it better. Because they had set up, and it's a small thing, but they had set up the whole like, a man had shot at him and missed, and then there's the reveal that he was the man that shot at himself, and I think that was really well done.
No, I totally agree. Yeah. I think, and I felt that conversation, everything that, I was like, yeah, it was rough. I felt it. And then, she basically is just like, no, like, I need to do this. I have to do this. This is the right thing to do. And he's like, he really does not want to. He really does not want to take her. But so then, I'm trying to remember what happens after that.
They're walking through and they get taken by the fireflies.
Right.
It's a much shorter. There's like a whole underwater chase scene with a bus and stuff in the game, and they pretty much just get taken.
Yeah. So and then right, and then Joel wakes up without Ellie, and Marlene is there with her stooges, and they have this conversation that I think is meant to kind of make you understand Marlene. I still didn't care. But he's like, she can tell he's different. Like, this is not, there's a connection. And she tries to tell him that she understands. She's like, I'm the one, like, I was her mother's best friend.
I'm the only other person who understands this.
Yeah. She says, I'm the only other person. You're right. Because this is when he learns how they plan to make the cure, because they go into the brain and anyway, essentially learns that the plan is they have to kill her to get what they need from her. And she says, she won't feel anything. And he's getting up. He's like, oh, absolutely not. And so she's like, take him, get him out of here. If he tries to do anything, do what you got to do or whatever. And this scene reminded me, like, I mean, a lot of stuff reminded me of the video game, but this scene in particular with him fighting the guys in the hallways and stuff, felt like the game.
It did. It had that same
like
same feeling,
movements and everything.
Yeah.
And so he goes in and he goes into where they're prepping her for surgery after killing a bunch of people, and tells the doctor, unhook her, and he's like, I'm not going to let you leave there. So he shoots him point blank. And he tells the nurses, unhook her now. And that was like we're still in dark Joel mode.
Yeah, we're not fucking around.
He's like, I'm fucking over this. Like, you're going to do what I say. This was the other one. This was the fourth one. The nurse in the front of the bed that Ellie's laying in is also a voice actress from the game. But I don't remember who she played. But she was another one that was a voice in the game, and then got an acting role in the show. And he takes Ellie, he goes into the parking garage, and we get this like conversation, another really short conversation between him and Marlene about doing the right thing, essentially. And he shoots her.
Yeah.
And puts Ellie in the car and takes off. And this leads us to like the last few minutes of the episode. So the last major thing, they get to where they can now, I think, see where Tommy and them are. I think they can see it. That's what they're looking at, right in the valley. And they have this conversation. He had said some stuff in the car already about like what happened, and he lies. He outright lies. They were attacked by raiders. A lot of people died. There were so many other people there though that were that could help, that were immune, and turns out you're not the only one, and all these things to try to make this feel better so she won't question it later, essentially.
Yeah.
And so we get this conversation right at the very end of the episode where they talk about he's very like, I'm totally like case closed on the other situation. We're gonna move on. You're alive. Everything's fine. And she doesn't believe a fucking thing that he has said to her. Not a thing. And she asks him, she says, you know, like, tell me, you know, is that true what you said? Swear to me. And he swears, and then it focuses on her, and she says, okay. And that was the end of the fucking finale.
And we're just done.
It felt abrupt, I think, because again, I was thinking it was going to be longer.
Yeah.
And I think from as far as the dialogue from the game and then this situation in the show, the only thing, and this is such a small thing, I think would have made it feel more like this is the end of the finale. They should have had them look back out and like zoom out in a cinematic way, because her just going, okay, and then it was like roll credits. It was like, what? Like that wasn't enough, you know, but so
I guess that was one of the things from the game they just didn't want to change at all.
I guess not. They were like, this works, and that's how we're doing it. I mean,
do you remember playing the game and her saying okay, and the fucking end credits come up, and you're like,
because it doesn't feel like the end. You're waiting on the next quest, the next thing to do. You're not thinking like,
you're like, this is gonna come back and haunt me later.
You're like, you're knowing that that's gonna come up. Yeah, no, totally. But yeah, so that of course leads into like the really big question of, and I know you know this is coming.
Yeah.
Do you think that Joel made the right decision? Not necessarily by lying, because I don't condone that anyway, but just the general what he chose to do. You know, what are your thoughts on this one?
So here, and I warned you that I was gonna go off a little bit when we got
That's
here.
Okay.
Here it comes. I was talking to Angel before the episode. I like moral philosophy as a field of study. I think it's very interesting. Sure. And this is, I think, one of the most the most interesting examples of putting it into practice that I've ever seen. There's a thing in moral philosophy, like in relation to moral particularism, that it's called a supererogatory act. And this is the concept in philosophy that like a lot of martyrdom tropes kind of stem from. And basically, like what it means is it literally means doing more than required. But from a moral standpoint, the idea is basically that like there are acts that are so much to ask of a single person that they would under no reasonable circumstances be required to do them to be a good person. Sure. But even though the action is like unquestionably good. And so like a martyr is a good person for taking that action. It's kind of like often viewed as like a clean slate. Like you do this, you're a good person no matter what else.
Right.
You've done it's like the big sacrifice trope in something. So Ellie has a chance to do one of these actions at the end of The Last of Us, but her agency is taken away. Like she's not the one that makes the decision to do it. And in moral particularism, the really interesting thing about that is that once the action is taken away from the person who can perform it, it becomes a bad action on the part of whoever enforces it, which really paints the Fireflies from this line of philosophy as the bad guys.
As the bad guys, yeah.
Unquestionably. So I love, because I believe in moral particularism. It's kind of the field of ethics that I most strongly rely in. It puts context behind it. It believes that there are no inherently good or bad actions. There are just situations. And that's kind of, it's what I believe in more or less, from like a code of ethics. There is also another very strong, counter argument to this, that is the field of utilitarianism and morality, because from that line of ethics, the Fireflies are doing an unquestionably good thing in sacrificing the good of one for the good of the many, saving the world, which is like another really interesting trope. But following like the moral particulars, so it's very interesting because the Fireflies think that they're doing good, and they follow like this field of ethics that pretty much enforces that belief that they're doing unquestionable good. So we're kind of against them, like, in the way that it's framed, and Joel stopping the Fireflies, I think the most morally correct thing for Joel would have been to put the agency back in the hands of Ellie, because it's her call. He doesn't do that. He fights the Fireflies, which I think is where he kind of becomes like, I don't want to call him a bad person, but I think it's where he kind of falls back into that pattern of Dark Joel, because this is something he's doing himself. He knows what Ellie will choose. He knows it's not the decision he wants her to make, because he is now seeing the Fireflies as evil. He stops them. And I think that it confirms what we already knew, that he's not doing this because it's morally the correct thing to do. He's doing it because he loves Ellie, and it's like a very selfish action on his part. But I do think I think the moral implications, and this is what it comes down to, is it's like, because you can argue moral philosophy all day from like a million different angles and theories. And what I think it comes down to for me, because he didn't do the most correct thing, I don't think he did. I think the worst thing would have been to let Ellie die without ever knowing about it. And he chose a middle ground thing. So in this whole was Joel right or not, the answer is sort of. But I think I kind of come down on Joel's side, because I don't think that I think more like utilitarianism as a way of leadership is not how you need to build the world.
Agreed.
And removing that choice from Ellie would have corrupted the path that they were on moving forward. Which I think is really powerful. So I do think in a way Joel did the good thing, but I think he did it not for the right reasons. And
I think I think that's very, I agree with everything you said. I think it's, for me, it's hard, because like I look at it from a couple different angles. I look at it from like what would I do in that situation, right? And as someone who has a child, that is something that obviously plays into my emotion for that scene, as far as like, and obviously like Ellie is sort of for lack of a better phrase, the replacement child, right? Because he lost Sarah 20 some odd years ago. And then this is the first daughter, like person, kid, whatever you want to say, that he's let into his life.
Yeah.
And I think that like, it was one of those things where that made it harder, because in my immediate go-to would be like, as soon as you said they had to die, the answer is not fucking day. I don't think so. Like that would have been my reaction. The thing that guys, I kind of like struggle with the fact that knowing that I would probably do the same thing is like kind of what you're talking about, or kind of just branching off what you're talking about with like this level of consent. Like it's physically, it's Ellie's physical being, it's Ellie's body. It should have been Ellie's choice. I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but and so this concept of you've got two different sides both taking away that consent and the ability to decide for herself, because when they put her under, they didn't tell her she was going to die. She had no idea. She's thinking they're going to pull some blood, problem solved, you know. And I think Ellie's character is set up in a sense to be like, oh yeah, like she would absolutely choose to die. But I'm not entirely convinced that she would be quick to say that. I think eventually they could probably convince her. She would probably talk herself into it, I think. But I think it would also frighten her, because to show up to some place like that, expecting get some blood drawn and I'm going to save everybody, and then my purpose is fulfilled, I have like a reason for being alive. And I think like that is like going into this new notion of like, no, like you got to die. And we don't actually know if it's even going to work. Like that's a very different, like kind of situation. And I think that the part that I would only hesitate on is the concept of consent, because they both
took
that away from her.
And I think it's really interesting because we know that Joel kills everyone because he knows that if they woke her up, Ellie would say yes. I think it's very interesting
Yes.
how strongly Marlene says this is what Ellie wants, even though she was too afraid to ask Ellie before they put her under.
Yeah,
So it's like
obviously
she's
she can't
also
be.
not sure.
Yeah, she can't be that sure. I mean, she want to save people? Yeah, she wanted to feel a sense of purpose, which of course now
Yeah.
has been robbed from her.
Yeah.
Even though, and then she finally trusts someone, another human being in this like fucked up world, and she knows he's looking her in the face and lying to her, which is not something they've done to each other. They have been nothing but honest from the very beginning. And so I think like that whole dynamic shift, like I mean, it changes everything because Joel, I mean, whether, if he had been, I could feel a little less bothered by the action if he had been at least honest afterwards.
Yeah.
Taking the pain and suffering of her being fucking pissed when you got far enough away. But the truth is like she says, a lot of people died because she knows he killed a lot of people. Like,
that is one moment. This is one moment. I think in some ways the game did it better. I think in some ways the show did it better. I like the tone that the show struck overall better because it's more subtle. Like there's more doubt with Ellie. Not
yeah, that's
necessarily in
true.
believing Joel or not, but just in what she would have done. Like she
Agreed.
doesn't in the show, I think, or sorry, in the game, she flat out says, "I'm waiting for
That
my
is true.
turn." And that was
That's
kind of
true.
something that they downplayed a little bit in the show, which
Which
on
is
the one
why,
hand,
yeah.
it made it a
Yeah.
more subtle ending. It leaves that uncertainty as to what Ellie would have chosen. In the game, it pretty much feels like flat out she's telling him, "I would have died. I would have done it." Because she's kind of like, it feels a lot more like a confirmation. But on the other hand, I think that confirmation makes his lying not acceptable, but I think it makes it more understandable because it's like if he tells her if she says to him, "I was waiting for my turn to die," and he says, "Well, it's too late. I killed all the fireflies to save you." That's going to be a tremendous amount of guilt. And I think in the game, it feels a lot more like him shielding her from that blow.
Yeah, no, I
Whereas,
see what you mean.
like, in the show, the blow isn't as bad, I feel like.
Yeah, that's true. No, and I think having both or having the other in mind going into the show, it was an interesting like take of the different kind of emotions that they played at for that part because I think like the way even down to the way she just says okay, you're like, oh god, this is gonna hurt so bad eventually, like because we've been through all this shit with them and then to just be because I mean what's true is I'm sure he's thinking, oh, if I tell her the truth then she'll just go seek them out again and we'll just be right back here and he's like, oh, if I lie we can just move on with our lives. And that need to protect her is it's hard because I'm sure as a parent, he felt he needed to protect Sarah and he wasn't able to do that. And I think that there's just so many emotions that go into a decision and a thought process like that it's probably something you could debate back and forth for hours because there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it. But yeah, no, I would have done the same thing. I don't think it was necessarily the 100% right. I'm with you on like it can be like, but I think that it'll be like I'm really curious to see what they do because I know I didn't play 2 or anything, but I know some of the story things. Mm-hmm. So I'm really curious about weaving all of these things together to take us into the next one, which hopefully they start filming this year because God knows I don't want to fucking wait. I don't want to wait a long time. We already had to wait every week to watch it, which is annoying. I have a comment. Sorry. Need more infected storyline is out of the way. I'm not sure what you mean by out of the way with Joel, but as someone who didn't play the game, so you're looking more for not in flashbacks. Yeah, this is a drama. This is not going to be, and I wouldn't expect that to be the case in part 2 either. It's a drama. It's not going to be like, balls to the wall zombies and gore and violence. It's not. I mean, it's not really a story about zombies or infected, whatever you want to call it. I guess they're kind of different, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it follows a lot of zombie tropes, even though they don't use the Z word.
Right, because it's supposed to be this new concept of where it comes from. It's not just a yeah. So I don't expect there to be. I'm sure there will be scenes, with infected and things like that, but I don't expect it to be too amped up in the next one either. I think it'll still be really focused on the people.
The other quick thing I wanted to bring up, and it's an off-topic thing, so I'm sorry. But I want to bring it up anyway. Because I can't resist the opportunity to talk about Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
I feel like so there are so many things at play going on in The Last of Us, but I really appreciate it in the same way that I appreciate Cabin in the Woods, which was actually the first thing I ever saw that did this, where you choose not to save the world.
Oh,
And
right. Yeah.
I
see what you're
think
saying.
and one thing that I think was really interesting, even though they don't touch on it as much in The Last of Us, is that Marty, when he makes that decision, like that his life is not going to be given up to sacrifice everybody else, or to like save everybody else, he goes into the movie firmly of the belief that humanity has run its course anyway.
It's time to go.
It's like it's very nihilistic, and it's like that's not really a belief that Joel or Ellie have in this. It's a show about survival, but I do think it's really interesting that in a way the cordyceps kind of like they've kind of won like as an entity. Like they're kind of this is a big victory for them, and even though they're not like the main antagonist of the show in so many narrative respects, like that idea of something else kind of having a chance to take over humanity and the moral implications of that, because so often in the show we've seen humanity framed again and again and again as the bad guy, and even down to this last episode with Joel, a lot of people think that Joel just flat out is the villain of the piece by the last episode, where you're kind of like, maybe let the mushrooms have at it. Like,
yeah, I mean, if all the people that are supposed to be good are bad, then what else is there?
Yeah.
I would have stayed in Bill's town, like you got everything, could have hooked the place up. Like,
yeah, and we were talking, that was another, thank you, Horror Fiend. We were talking beforehand about if there was anything that made us angry.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I didn't have a lot of moments like that in the show. I had one single moment that made me angry, and it's that they don't lock the gate when they're leaving Bill
at the end of it?
Bill and Frank's. Like, what if they want to go back there? Like,
and now it'll just be open to raiders and whoever.
Yeah.
I think I mean, I think like it's I think anybody who didn't feel like they had but the time that we meet them, or the time that we go to Bill and Frank's, he's just ready to kind of still, like, he's still not really sure he wants to keep Ellie around. He's very much, this is the beginning of his journey with like his emotions, and he's not trying to stay nowhere with her. He would like to get her where she's got to go so he can move the fuck on with his life. And I think like that's probably like, because they did have a great setup there, but it's like it was an emergency only for Joel.
I understand that it was kind of like a character growth thing, but
yeah. And for the more supportive of the more infected, I did say I would have liked more of them. I just know this franchise enough, if we'll say that. I mean, it's two, so we'll say franchise. I know it well enough to know what to expect, and it's a drama. It's not a zombie like craze fest. It's more about the people. I mean, and I think and we talked about this already, but obviously in the game there's way more infected because you're playing it. It's completely different. But this gave us an opportunity to just focus on some of the human stories and like the things that were going on, and I think it's probably going to stick to that for 2 as well.
Yeah, I would, if you want more infected, definitely play the game. And if you this is I'm a little bit biased here, but if you want more of that kind of content, watch All of Us Are Dead. Like,
yeah.
wait,
I think this is JR. I think that's who that is. That's on their account, I'm assuming. Based on the typos.
And not to be dismissive of it, but like there are
no,
really
I
good
think he
zombie
really liked
shows
all
that
of us are dead. If that's who it is, I think it's JR. But yeah, that was one of the ones that we've talked about before. Train to Busan. That's
yeah.
There's because this is, I don't think this is going to change. I think this is pretty much going to stay how it is. It's going to have the right moments, and we're going to get the oohs and the ahs with the different ones, and we're going to be like, holy shit, that was crazy. But then it's going to be right back to the tear stuff. And yeah, I think the only other thing I wanted us to at least touch on briefly is, and I think I know the answer to this considering how fucking detailed it was, but how do you think this stands up without a game as a reference?
Oh, so I did a little bit of market research. Neither of my parents had played the game, and I made them both watch it. Aside from my mom not speaking to me right now because I made her cry, um, they both really enjoyed it. They were both really invested. My dad really loved the story, and and I could never get him to play the game. I feel like this kind of rectified that a little bit. I feel very
Yeah.
vindicated right now, but I do think and it was hard for me to look at it as like a piece of media outside of the game,
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I believe full-heartedly that it did a good job.
I don't think there's any missing things here. I think so. My parents watched it as well as people who had not played the game, and then my girlfriend had not played it either. And she was like completely smitten with it. Like I don't think I don't think there were any complaints. I don't think she felt confused by anything. I mean, it was a pretty seamless viewing experience I'm feeling. So like, it wasn't like she was like asking me a million questions like, I don't understand this or what's going on. It wasn't like that. So I think I'm fairly confident that people who watched this who did not play the game were not like, don't know anything about the game. They were like, yeah, like it was, you don't need it if you're going to not ever have anything to do with it. It's not necessary. I mean, I think there's a couple things I think the game would offer to kind of touch on some things in maybe a different way. And then obviously like you're fighting for survival or whatever, but I don't think that it was one of those. I think this is a perfect standalone. It wouldn't need the game to make sense, I don't think.
And I did say there was only one thing that made me mad. Something else made me mad in my viewing experience. It had nothing to do with the show itself. But
Okay.
You mentioned watching it with your girlfriend.
Yeah.
I was trying to watch it with my partner, and at first, because we were talking about watching it, we had actually just finished. He'd never seen Game of Thrones. We had just finished season 8 before The Last of Us started. So we were looking for another hour show, and I was like, let's do The Last of Us. But I had seen one episode, and he was like, you seemed really upset when you finished this, and I know you're watching it with your parents. Do you want to be watching these episodes 3 times a week? And I was like, maybe not. And he's like, let's just give it like 8 weeks. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, but aren't you going to be like missing out? Because he played the game, and I was like, I'm sure you want to see it, and you don't want, like stuff online. And he was like, I've played the game, and that's enough. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, that's not the reaction. Like, get hyped.
Like, yeah. No, we watch stuff virtually because we're like both single parents, and she lives kind of far from me, so we watch stuff virtually like almost every night except for when I do lives because it's late. But we usually try to watch something, and so that was our Sunday show that we watched virtually, and we just we text while we're watching it and stuff, and it was cool. I do think it's cool as a horror fan in general, because I feel this way even if it's not related to game adaptations, but I love experiencing things with other people for the first time.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's such a unique thing. It's like when you show somebody a movie that they've never seen for the first time and they loved it, or they were like, ooh, oh my God, or like, all of those things. And so it was kind of cool, like she didn't have any like point of reference for it really. And so that was kind of neat to like hear the thoughts and things. And then it was funny because I already knew so many things that were going to happen, and it still always got to me. But she learned pretty early on not to trust anything. Like she would be like, she'd text me and be like, "This is about to go so bad." Like you could just tell. It's like, yeah, you are getting into the rhythm of The Last of Us. I love it. It's great.
That was my mom, because they introduced Sam and Henry, and mom was like, she liked them for about 5 minutes, and then she figured it out. She just like, there was a moment really early on where she's like, this is gonna be sad. And I was like,
yeah.
And she's like, do they die? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, no, you tell me. And I was like,
oh,
maybe. She just...
That's so funny.
Oh man.
Yeah, no, I loved this. This was like a 10 out of 10. I wouldn't change a single thing. There's not a single thing I hated. I really genuinely loved everything.
This was fantastic.
Yeah, I loved it. So yeah,
HBO's best work, honestly, and I say that as someone that watches a lot of HBO.
Yeah. I don't remember off the top of my head what we're doing next month, but this was a fun conversation.
It's not going to live up to this.
God, whatever it is, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're not familiar, Kat and I have done 2 other episodes so far. We covered House of the Dead and Doom was our one.
And I promise neither one was this long. I don't talk about moral philosophy this much in either.
Well, that's because there's too many. Yeah.
I don't almost cry this often either. Got a little bit teary in this one.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's about it for our March horror video game adaptations. This is probably the best of the best. I don't think any of them are going to top. I mean, I know they're not because we already know what the other ones are. But so, if you like hanging out and talking video game adaptations, we will be back next month with another one. Thanks everybody that stopped by with the chat and viewed. And Kat's link should be in the description for this episode, unless I sucked really bad and I didn't put it, but I think I did. Anyway, and thank you guys so much for hanging out. Have a good rest of your night and good weekend coming up, and we'll see you next month.
Bye guys.